Supergirl is a very normal movie. Now, I've seen a lot of reviews saying that Supergirl is the Incredible Hulk or the Thor of the DCU, but I think that it's very disrespectful to compare corporate and mundane and gray slop to a fairly enjoyable film.
Another!
Without going into major spoilers outside of the trailers, Supergirl is a very different film from Superman. When Superman offers a very straightforward and powerful theme of humanity and hope and justice and all that stuff, Supergirl flips things around and seeks to have themes of imperfection and realism and the harsh reality of our world. Although I think it was executed a lot worse than Superman, it provides me a breath of fresh air from the typical save the humans type of films. I think what I can give the movie credits for though is the actors, with Jason Momoa as Lobo being the scene stealer in his 30 seconds of screen time. He was one of the only people to have actual charm and personality, which reflects Jason Momoa's monstrous drive to be Lobo.
It was a message immediately. It was Jason Momoa texting me saying, just all caps, Lobo baby, a billion exclamation points.
Which I gotta respect. Billy Alcock as Supergirl provides a very stark contrast from the goody two-shoes and Boy Scout approach of David Cornsweet, which provides a much needed nuance and flavor to a character that is portrayed by the general media as just a female version of Superman. She adds that flair that shows us that these are very different characters with different personalities, and I like that. The other actors do an okay job, but it's muddied by their character writing. We'll get to that later. The movie is also fairly well paced. It has a very smooth flow to it. It doesn't beat around the bush too much. And it has a pretty linear and simple plot. Guy poisons dog, we gotta save the dog, so we need to get the guy. Though with that, it did become somewhat predictable at times. There were times that the writing deliberately nerfs Kara because in actuality, she can finish the plot in 30 minutes. But in order to make it a long movie, she needs to constantly get nerfed to the point where it gets pretty distracting. Lastly, I think the action scenes are mostly hit or miss. Again, with the fact that most of the movie, Kara has been nerfed, the action kinda follows with it. And one of the only times where she's in full power, the movie doesn't do a great job in showcasing it in full scale. There's this specific move that Kara did at the end which got me pretty hyped and stoked, but the rest of the movie is just a lot of punching and lasering and flipping and stuff. With that, I think this film would have really benefited from a James Gunn director because it lacks that sauce that James Gunn uses in his action scene. Most action sequences in this movie have repetitive slow-mo and boring choreography, and almost all have a needle drop to the point that it gets very excessive. Plus, I think the song choices kinda don't fit most of the time, or maybe I just don't like the kind of modern pop songs approach instead of the classic songs that James Gunn uses. Again, if Gunn had been the director for this, I think the overall spectacle and choreography would have been better. I also think he would have made the characters far more likable, and that brings me to my next point. The characters. Oh boy.
Oh boy, yeah.
I think the characters and their relationships are pretty boring. Aside from Rhaenyra Targaryen and Khal Drogo, we don't really care for the other characters. Well, I don't really care for Aquaman as well, but because he's funny, I'll give him a pass. But for other characters, specifically the villain, we as the audience don't get enough from him. We get shown from one of the first scenes that this dude killed this girl's parents, which is the girl who goes to Kara for help. But we as bystanders of the movie, as the audience, don't really care for this girl at this point in the movie, and we super don't care for her revenge for her parents, not until Crypto was poisoned or paralyzed. Not to mention that that's such a weak way to make the audience care about the villain getting defeated as well. Only then can we finally care about what's happening. The villain that poisons Crypto doesn't have that over-the-top personality or the relatable backstory that a villain should have in order to make them, well, a villain. In this movie, he's just a really bad guy who kills people brutally. He's a bad dude who kidnaps women and marries them. And that's not even his personality, that's the culture of the race. The only thing I know about this dude is that he likes milk, because in two separate scenes in the movie, we see him chugging a bowl of cereal and a bottle of milk. So him, as the character, we know literally nothing about. Not his motivations, his backstory, his traits aside from being a milkman, because as far as because we know the bad things that he does are the traits of their ethnicity or whatever, not the individual person. So the moment where the good guys win, we don't have that cathartic moment of vengeance or victory. It's just bland. As opposed to seeing Lex Luthor cry at the end of Superman, it's a night and day difference. The girl that Kara has as her companion is pretty boring as well. I mean, I can get behind her as a character, but her relationship and overall story just brings me a lot of question marks. As I've said earlier, this girl has her family killed by the villain. But in the end, when they're finally gonna kill the villain, to get revenge, Kara is all talk no jutsu and forces her to not kill him in the end, so that she could kill him. Now, I'm all for redemption arcs and stuff, but I feel like this is too on the nose for my liking. Like, she basically was told that revenge is bad by an external person instead of figuring it out on their own. A great story that chooses this structure should have the characters see the guy they're trying to kill as not this one-sided villain. The villain should have traits and personality that can compel the girl not to kill them in the first place. But as I've said earlier, the villain has less traits than a tin can, so the ending felt kind of not earned and forced. So in the end, Supergirl is just a very generic, average superhero flick. It doesn't have a theme that hits you hard or great characters like what DC and Marvel has done before, nor does it have any spectacular and over-the-top action sequences that comic book films should be the bare minimum for. With all that said, I think Supergirl is an average 5 out of 10.